Okay, we are really glad today to present this series of talks conducted by Mr. Jeffrey Say from Salle Institute of Art. This series of talks serves to be a platform for collectors to be more equipped with decisions how to collect a piece of art and where to start from. Very often when you look at a piece of art, you always wonder immediately whether you like or dislike. Or sometimes you get kind of frustrated not knowing how you feel about this piece of art and what the artist is trying to say. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is what is art and what is art for. It's trying to define what is art in this current situation and whether through the ages art has been redefined and how has it a place in art history today. In the next few sessions of our series, we'll be discussing a wide array of topics such as how to look at a work of art, how is the value of an artwork being ascertained, and how to decide what the artist is trying to decide across to his audience. We're also going to talk about sculptures, about materiality and forms, introducing the art and technique of sculpturing as well as how it has evolved over time. And of course, there is a very interesting topic about contemporary art and where it is today, the Staff Shark and many other interesting topics on our fourth series, Where is Contemporary Art in the Current World? Explores on different media like performing arts to installations. We hope you will enjoy this series of talk and welcome you back to the gallery and attend our exhibitions, and hope you will enjoy the art talk which can be downloaded in our website as well. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yes, as Chris mentioned, this is the first in a series of 4 talks, right? Which is really meant as an introduction, okay, to art, right? And we will kick off with, of course, a very age-old philosophical question, right, of what is art, okay? And and I'll continue, okay, in the second half of the talk with the purposes and function of art. Okay, once we have in a way resolved the definition of what art is about. Okay, I don't know in your experience, okay, or when you've probably gone with a friend to an exhibition, or to an art gallery, okay, and you found yourself maybe talking aloud, or at least thinking to yourself, right? You call that art? Okay, have you all have you all used this phrase before? And my 5-year-old kid can do it, okay, or I can do it, all right, okay, and also frequently, okay, you ask yourself, but is it art? Okay, in 1926, I think or thereabouts, right, a certain American collector, okay, he was returning to America after buying a piece of sculpture by I would say the first abstract sculptor, okay, Constantine Brancusi, okay, and was trying to bring it back to the U.S. And at that time in the U.S., artworks were not subjected to custom duties, okay, but when he tried to bring this piece of sculpture in, he was stopped by the customs officials, okay, who was not convinced that this is a piece of art, right, okay, and eventually I think after some arguing, okay, the customs official was still not convinced, okay, and he was taxed under this category of kitchen and hospital supplies, okay, right, because they thought that this was a piece of manufactured metal, right. But of course, Brancusi, and he had his own supporters. He went to court over this, and thankfully for art, he won. Okay, so there was a debate about whether this sculpture actually looks like a bird. Okay, that was one of the points of contention in court. Okay, does it look like a bird to you? Okay, but Brancusi calls it bird in space. Okay, now frequently you'll come across this in Brancusi's work. Okay, because most of his works, if not all, okay, are abstract. Okay, but but he makes references to nature. Okay. But if you look carefully, okay, the streamlined form of the sculpture as well as the verticality of it, okay, all of this is suggestive of flight, okay? A bird perhaps about to take off, okay? How about this? Mark Wallinger, a UK artist, right? Okay, he's an artist that's full of wit, okay? And this is actually an artwork, which he entitled A Real Work of Art, okay? And it is actually a real horse, a racehorse, okay? And it was displayed as a piece of art. Okay? Now, I can see your faces, you're not convinced by it, okay? Right? It was probably displayed at a gallery, so we'll come to that later, all right? And the context of which makes something art, right? But if you look at the title, it's interesting, A Real Work of Art, okay? And the fact that he names it a real work of art and also advertising its existence, okay, meant that he was trying to challenge the very notion of what art is about, okay? And that's what artists frequently do as well. All right, we look at a couple of definitions, both of which are, I would say, quite limiting, okay, in its definition. Okay, and you have the Oxford Dictionary, which says that it's expression of human creative talent. Okay, now notice the word that human, okay, and there must be, of course, some creativity in it, right? And it must come in a kind of a visual form, right? How about works using text, right? Can we consider that art as well? Okay, well, we'll come to that maybe later. Okay, and the Britannica gives a more detailed definition of what art is. Okay. Okay, am I blocking your? Huh? All right. Okay. Okay. But of course, that list there, painting, sculpture, etc., is of course not exhaustive. Okay, because today the categories of art has expanded even more. Right. You know, in this talk, I've not shown you other works that might be considered art. Okay, a performance artist, what's his name? Okay, anyway, he did a performance where he ate fetuses. Okay, but anyway, that sort of cannibalism in art, you know, is also happening, right? Okay, and there are other such instances where I recall a Danish artist who put goldfishes in a blender. Okay. And it was displayed in an art gallery, and audiences were challenged to switch on the button. Right? Okay, but anyway. Now, by its original definition, art, okay, it comes from the Latin word, ars, meaning skill or craft. Okay, so interesting again, you know, that skill or craft is seen to be a prerequisite, okay, for art making. Right? And also the application of the body of knowledge, most often using a set of skills. Okay? Now how about works? Okay, some of you have probably encountered works which use minimal skill or no skill at all. Right? Okay? And right, do those qualify as art then? Okay. Okay, well, I won't go through this, but these are some very nice quotes. Okay, I think you have it in your handout. Okay, I like the last one best, you know. Art is. Okay, and then you can fill in the blanks. Okay, art is. Right. In, when was this? 2006. Okay, an artist, David Hensel, he submitted a work for the Royal Academy, the prestigious Royal Academy in the UK, summer exhibition. Okay. Unfortunately, the head got separated from its plinth. Its plinth is made of slate, and its rest, the rest you see there is a bone rest, right? It's made of bone. It got separated, okay? And what happened was that the head was sent back to the artist, okay? While the plinth and the wooden rest were accepted for the exhibition, okay? And it's, you know, and that happened at the Royal Academy, all right? And it led, of course, you know, David Hensel to make this remark about, if you look at the last line, you know, about this, a pantomime, the artwork is like a pantomime, right? Okay, manipulation, right? He talks about manipulation by collectors and, artists and, not artists, but museums, auction houses, etc. Okay. And this happened. This is not an urban legend, right? It happened. Okay, now the visual arts have traditionally consisted of painting and sculpture. Okay, architecture is sometimes included. Okay, but however, in the late 20th century, 21st century, right, the term visual arts have expanded to include, okay, other so-called categories or genres like photography. Okay, there's still a debate about photography. Okay, now there's such a thing as fine art photography, right? And then you have also installation, performance art, not to be confused with performing arts. Okay, right? And more art forms are emerging. And of course, video, right? Video. Okay, and defining art raises problems. Okay, because as I mentioned, I think earlier, a real work of art, okay, by Mark Wallinger, okay, and he seemed to exemplify artists who constantly challenge the very nature of art, the very definition of art, right? Okay, and so you see works that are coming out that do not belong to the mainstream, so to speak, okay, because artists are constantly coming out with so-called counter examples, right? Okay, that defy the mainstream. And it all started, I think, with this artist. Well, I don't know whether you can call him an artist, okay? There's still the anti-Duchamp camp, right? Even today, okay? Marcel Duchamp, right? Now, he belongs to this art movement called Dada, the Dada movement, okay? And the Dada movement often sought to create works that are irrational, okay? That defy the rational. And what Duchamp did was that, he would frequently go to a hardware store and he would buy second-hand goods, okay, or products like this. This is actually a urinal, right? Okay, and what he did was that he simply turned it upside down, okay, signed it with a fictitious name, R. Mutt, M-U-T-T, right, and submitted it for an exhibition. And of course, not surprisingly, it was rejected outright. Okay, but that gave him further ammunition to give a kind of a retort, right? And this was the retort that he gave. Okay? Now, whether Mr. Mutt with his own hands made the fountain or not has no importance. Okay, he chose it, right? So he has given a new thought for that object. Okay, in other words, okay, by doing that, okay, he has transformed that so-called urinal into a piece of art. Okay, so for Duchamp, the idea is more important than the actual work, right? So Duchamp is often considered to be the father of what you call conceptual art, okay, where the idea, the concept behind it takes primacy over the actual execution or even the aesthetics of the work, right? So this is an important work. I mean, whether Duchamp meant it as a prank or a joke, which some people still believe he did, okay, we don't know, okay, but it is probably the single most influential work of the 20th century, right? Because it has influenced, conceptual art and other art forms, okay, which place a lot of emphasis on the idea. And he has also raised certain crucial questions about the nature of art. Okay, does art have to be beautiful? Okay, does art have to be original? Okay, because Duchamp, he has no qualms about making multiple copies of this. Okay, and he also raises questions about authenticity as well. Okay, so those are very important philosophical questions, right? And it's called fountain, right? Now, in the end, whose definition is it? So we have that problem with craft. Okay, I'm going to come to craft later. Okay, do you consider craft to be art? What's the distinction between art and craft then? Okay. I mean, there are many examples. Okay, now this is one. Right. I mean, just think of, like, let's say a piece of Chinese porcelain. Now, I consider that to be craft, but now it's been accepted as fine art. Okay, because, you know, porcelain was functional. Okay, people use them. Okay, and they were normally made by anonymous, you know, so-called crafts workers. Okay, but yet, you know, they have now been accepted as art. But how about, you know, this work, for example, in more sort of primitive societies, okay, or like in the American Indian society, like the Navajos. Okay, this is a blanket, right? Okay, and you know, a very abstract, you know, blanket with geometric shapes. Now, do you consider this to be a work of art? Right. Now, who would consider this to be a work of art? Can I maybe have a show of hands? No, none of you. Okay, good, only one. Okay, so the rest, I will assume either you have no opinion, okay, or you consider this to be craft. Am I correct? Okay, right. Okay, I have to say that, you know, normally, I mean, items like Navajo blankets, okay, are still considered to be craft or classified as craft because of a few things. Firstly, they use non-artistic materials, okay, right? Secondly, because of their functionality, they are useful. They can be used, you know, unlike, for example, much of fine art, okay, which are non-functional, okay. Their anonymity, okay, they are normally made by people who we don't know by name, okay. And this one, I don't know for the female audience there, okay. They are normally made by women, all right, okay. So, and that is why, you know, crafts were traditionally termed also low art. Okay, so I would say traditionally there's this distinction not only between art and craft, but between high art and low art. So fine art is always considered to be, you know, kind of high art, okay, versus craft or low art. Okay, so is it fair at all to make this distinction? Okay, we have to ask ourselves. But coming to contemporary times, okay, this distinction, this division between high art and low art is blurred, increasingly blurred, right? Okay, and this is really a reflection of our own changing social values as well. Okay, now the question is what enables us to group together as art? Okay, these three different paintings. Okay, one is of course the one I showed you at Lascaux. Okay, the famous work, I mean, you know, signature work of Piet Mondrian, right? And then Michelangelo's, right, the Creation of Adam. Okay, in the Sistine Chapel. Okay. Now I won't go through all these, of course. I mean, you can you know, go back and, you know, maybe ponder over these points. It can be all of this or some of this that makes something art. Okay, right? Again, originality is subjective, as I said. You know, Duchamp was the first one to question, you know, originality with his fountain. Okay, artifactuality as well. Now, let's say you pick a piece of driftwood, right, from a beach, okay, and can you just display that driftwood and then consider it to be art? Okay, so artifactuality means that that piece of driftwood that you picked up have to be transformed, modified somehow, okay, through human agency. Okay, and I think for artifactuality that discounts what animals do as art as well. Okay, but again, as I said, you know, we have no definite answer, right? But I think the one point that is cited often about, you know, when you say, you know, you call that piece of brick art, you know, right? And oh, they will cite it, right? They will cite this philosopher called George Dickey, right, who came up with his own theory called the institutional context. That's point number 3, institutional context of art, okay? Where something becomes an artwork if it is sanctioned by certain people or if it's displayed in a certain context. So that's why I brought this example. I mean, you know, you can confidently say that these works that you see here is art because it's in an art gallery or if it's at a museum. Okay? That's what makes it art, right? And at the museum, of course, you also have, it must have gone through the curators who chose it. And by choosing that work, sanction it as art. Okay? Now, it's a fairly inclusive theory, okay, but there are problems as well. Okay, but I won't have time to go through, you know, through those problems of that particular theory, right? The institutional context, right? Okay, and you have others as well. I mean, if you look at the, you know, the 6th point, it must be similar to other artworks. Okay, now this is interesting as well because it's called the theory of family resemblance. Okay, it may not look exactly like the other work, okay, but perceptually, it resembles that work. Okay, it belongs to what you call the same family. Okay. It must have a certain theory behind it. So you know, a lot of artists today, what they do is that, you know, they employ, you know, top-notch curators, writers to write for them, okay, to write about their works. Okay, so as long as there's a theory behind it, okay, right, people will accept it as art. Okay, now the first one, to create beauty. I think this is, you know, a kind of a very common, okay, function of art, right? And artists, you know, since the time of the Greeks, okay, you know, they have always aimed to improve upon nature. Okay, they wanted to perfect nature. Okay, and that is known by the term called idealize. Okay, right? Right. So the Greeks created what you call idealized sculptures. Right. So notice Greek sculptures, they look almost perfect. Right? Okay. How about this work? Okay. Have you all seen this work before? Okay, maybe even in person. Okay, by the French neoclassical artist Ingres. Okay, Jean-Dominique Ingres. Right? And this work is entitled Odalisque. Now, Odalisque actually is a term that refers to the concubines, okay, in the Turkish Sultan's harem. Okay, right? And well, in Western term, I suppose in Western art term, this is just called a reclining nude. Okay, right? In a very languid pose, right? Okay, but when people saw this work by arguably the greatest draftsman who ever lived, they thought, hey, there's something wrong with this. Can you see? It's too elongated. Okay? Yes. It doesn't conform to anatomical realism. Okay? And some commented that there are no bones, no muscles. Right? And some say that there are 2 or 3 vertebrae too many. Right? Okay? Right? But, you know, how could a master like Ang make such a mistake? Right? Okay, he couldn't possibly. I mean, look at the sumptuous background. Look at the peacock fan and, you know, the curtains. I mean, you know, very few people could paint like this. So how could he make a mistake with a figure? Okay, of course it's not, right? He uses a long line to convey the curvature and sensuality, right? He wanted to make the figure more sensual and elegant, okay, by elongating it. Okay, so what Ang was doing was that he was trying to idealize the figure, to conform to a certain notion of beauty, right? To decorate, okay, right? This is also perhaps one of the oldest functions of art, even today, the aesthetic urge, right? That's why you all collect art as well, right? Okay. So that you can wake up every morning, right? Okay. Look at it. Be happy. Okay. And increasingly, even in Singapore, we see the government realizing the value of art. Okay. Right. In order to create a kind of a more livable environment. Okay. The aesthetic urge. And one example. Okay. Now this is taken, what do you call a decorative motif, okay, from the Alhambra Palace. Okay, I'm sure some of you have been there in Spain. Okay, and probably the Alhambra Palace is probably the most sumptuously decorated Islamic palace. Okay, or any, for that matter, any palace. Okay, and the Muslims, the Islamic artists, right? You notice that when you look at Islamic art, okay, you notice that it is highly decorative in its character. Okay, highly ornamented. Okay, ornamentation, play a big role in Islamic art. Okay, that's because in Islam, okay, you're actually forbidden to depict the human figure. Okay, because you are seen in competition with God. Right? Okay, so you're forbidden to depict the human. So that is why they chose the other way. Okay, right? They resorted to making art which are more highly decorative, right, in character. Okay, and this is a perfect example of Islamic art, right, where Islamic artists normally when they create patterns like this, okay, they would create in such a way that the patterns seem to be infinite. Okay, right, in its repetition and its multiplicity. Okay, to immortalize. Okay, I mean this is also one of the oldest functions of art. Okay, so hope to see you. I'm going for my second round. Okay, because the food is good.
More food.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody.